Think you've heard it all? These 30 bands from the 60s, 70s, and 80s prove the best rock wasn't always in the spotlight. Now let's go back to the 60s first. Magic Potion is the kind of track that hits like a lightning bolt. Fuzzy, fierce, and pure late 60s psychedelia. Taken from their lone release, The Open Mind, in 1969, this British band created a cult classic that still turns heads today. The album is packed with swirling guitars, haunting vocals, and an energy that captures the psychedelic underground at its peak. Though they never followed it up, the band's one album remains a prized gem for collectors. It's raw, hypnotic, and proof that sometimes one great record is all it takes to make history. When you listen to July's self-titled 1968 album, it's like stepping into a kaleidoscope. Bright, surreal, and full of wonder. Tracks like Dandelion Seeds capture that perfect mix of whimsical lyrics and trippy production that defined British psychedelia. While the album didn't chart at the time, it has since become a cult favorite among collectors and psych connoisseurs. Their use of backward tape loops, dreamy harmonies, and unexpected guitar bursts gave their music a distinctive charm. July didn't stick around long, but that one record left a lasting imprint. It's a beautiful reminder of how adventurous the late 60s really were. In my opinion, the Misunderstood weren't just ahead of their time. They were in another league altogether. Though they started out in California, their true magic happened after relocating to the UK in the mid-60s. Their 1969 compilation, Before the Dream Faded, gathers their most essential tracks, including the searing I Can Take You to the Sun, a song many psych fans consider one of the best ever recorded. With steel guitar bends, wild feedback, and poetic lyrics, their sound was visionary. Sadly, military drafts and immigration issues tore the band apart, leaving behind what ifs and one unforgettable legacy. Let's go to Orange County. The Human Expression was a short-lived but explosive garage psych band that captured the wild spirit of 1966. Their signature track, Love at Psychedelic Velocity, was a frantic, fuzz-drenched ride that became a cult classic decades later. They recorded 3 singles between 1966 and 1967, all now prized by collectors. Interestingly, the band turned down the chance to record Born to Be Wild, a decision that haunted them. Internal tensions and a tragic accident involving guitarist Martin Eschliman led to their breakup before they could release a full album. A promising fire, gone too soon. The West Coast pop art experimental band was from Los Angeles and led by Bob Markley, a former law student and TV host who bankrolled the group. Their 1967 album Part 1, released on Reprise Records, blended folk rock, experimental noise, and psychedelia. Tracks like Shifting Sands and I Won't Hurt You captured their strange, uneasy vibe. 'Cause I was born to wander. Markley's obsession with teenage themes and studio control caused friction. Despite a major label deal and 4 full-length albums, the band never broke through. Their music remains an unsettling, ambitious artifact of late 60s counterculture gone sideways. Back in Minneapolis, The Litter roared onto the scene with their 1967 debut Distortions, a garage rock essential. The opening track, Action Woman, is a snarling, fuzz-soaked anthem that's since become a garage classic. They followed up with 100 Fine in 1968, leaning more into psychedelia, and Emerge in 1969, released on ABC Records, which flirted with early hard rock. Despite regional popularity and a brief flirtation with national attention, they never caught on commercially. But their raw sound and aggressive edge earned them a place as pioneers in the transition from garage rock to heavy psych. We end this era with a little-known band called Cock. They released one of the West Coast's most compelling psychedelic albums. Led by Gary Lee Yoder, their self-titled LP in 1969 delivered a mix of fuzz guitars, melodic hooks, and extended jams like Trilogy. The track Everything's Changing captures the album's moody, mind-expanding atmosphere. Though they had a major label behind them, Epic Records, Cock received little promotion and quickly dissolved. Yoder later joined Blue Cheer, but Cock's lone album became a prized collector's item over the years. It's a perfect example of how one great record can define an entire band's legacy. One single was all it took for the third Bardo to make their mark. In 1967, they released I'm 5 Years Ahead of My Time, a psychedelic garage anthem with Eastern-influenced guitar and a sneering, defiant tone. Produced by Rusty Evans and arranged by session legend Teddy Randazzo, the song was too edgy for the mainstream and got banned from several radio stations. The band dissolved shortly after, leaving behind just 6 recorded tracks. Despite the brief run, that one single became a staple on garage compilations and turned the third Bardo into underground legends. The Daybreakers emerged from the mid-60s Chicago garage scene with a raw, no-frills sound. Their standout track, Psychedelic Siren, released in 1967, featured pounding drums, fuzzed-out guitars, and an actual police siren wailing in the background. It was rough, chaotic, and totally unforgettable. Pressed in extremely limited numbers, the single never reached a national audience, but became a prized cut among garage collectors. There's no album, no big story, just one killer 45 that captured the rebellious DIY spirit of the era. The Daybreakers didn't break through, but they sure left a noise behind. Few records from the late 60s and early 70s burn with the same intensity as Moonblood. Released in a tiny run in 1971, it combined heavy psychedelic rock with spiritual urgency. Jim Beach's vocals on Sank Divided sound like a man possessed, shouting scripture over thick fuzz guitars and pounding rhythms. Fraction operated in obscurity around Los Angeles, playing local church halls and underground venues. Their religious themes and explosive sound didn't fit any mold, and the band dissolved soon after the album's release. Today, Moonblood is a holy grail for collectors and a fierce listen that still resonates. Named after the Mervyn Pike novel Titus Groan, released one album in 1970 that became a sleeper gem of the progressive rock underground. The self-titled LP blended jazz-influenced arrangements, folk touches, and complex instrumental passages. Tracks like Hall of Bright Carvings showed off their adventurous spirit. Clocking in at over 10 minutes with shifting time signatures and flute solos. Despite strong musicianship and a unique sound, the band failed to gain traction and disbanded within a year. Original vinyl copies of the album are now collector's items. Titus Groan remains a must-hear for fans of early boundary-pushing British prog.
Please don't turn away, as I've got something going
Cressida's melodic, organ-driven prog rock stood out during the crowded early 70s scene. Signed to Vertigo Records, they released 2 albums, Cressida in 1970 and Asylum in 1971. While the debut introduced their lush, symphonic sound, Asylum refined it with tracks like Munich, showcasing intricate arrangements and emotional depth. Frontman Angus Cullen's gentle vocals paired beautifully with Peter Jennings' expressive keyboard work. They toured with bands like Black Sabbath and Colosseum, but couldn't crack the mainstream. When Vertigo dropped them, the band folded soon after. Today, both albums are cult favorites, offering a more pastoral, song-focused side of progressive rock. High Tide brought a heavier, more aggressive edge to the early British prog scene. Their 1969 debut Sea Shanties is often cited as one of the first proto-metal records, with slashing guitar work from Tony Hill and searing electric violin by Simon House. Tracks like Feudalist Lament were dense, intense, and totally unlike anything else at the time. They followed up with a more melodic self-titled album in 1970, but never found commercial footing. Simon House later joined Hawkwind and played with David Bowie, but High Tide's early work remains a groundbreaking fusion of psych, prog, and raw heaviness. Let's move on to T2. They released just one album, It'll All Work Out in Boomland, in 1970, but what a statement it was. Blending heavy guitar riffs with complex compositions and emotional depth, the album featured standout tracks like No More White Horses, where Keith Cross's guitar work reached near mythic levels. Only 5,000 copies were pressed, and due to lack of promotion, it sank without a trace. The band quickly fell apart, but the album gained legendary status over the decades through word of mouth and reissues. For fans of early prog with grit and soul, T2 is a buried treasure that delivers. Mayblitz was a hard-hitting power trio that combined heavy blues riffs with psychedelic flourishes. Formed by ex-Uriah Heep drummer Tony Newman, the band released 2 albums on Vertigo, their self-titled debut in 1970 and the 2nd of May in 1971. The track, Smoking the Day Away, is a stoner rock staple. Loaded with thick, fuzzy guitar and a slow burning groove. Despite their strong sound and early momentum, they couldn't compete with the era's bigger names and disbanded after their second release. Both albums later became collector favorites, cementing Mayblitz as a key player in the heavier side of early 70s rock. You know, Chrome didn't sound like anyone else in the late 70s and early 80s. Formed in San Francisco, they fused punk rock aggression with tape loops, electronics, and dystopian textures. Their 1979 album, Half Machine Lip Moves, is a chaotic masterpiece. Tracks like TV as Eyes feel like transmissions from a future gone wrong. Led by Damon Edge and guitar savant Helios Creed, the band influenced industrial and noise rock before those genres had names. Too abrasive for radio and too weird for punk purists, Chrome remained in the shadows. But their futuristic sonic assaults built a legacy that still echoes today. They were often associated with the pub rock scene, but Help Yourself carved out their own mellow, story-driven niche in the early 70s. Their 1971 self-titled debut introduced a relaxed, country-tinged rock sound that drew comparisons to early Grateful Dead. Songs like Old Man highlighted their knack for laid-back grooves and thoughtful lyrics. The band released 5 albums between 1971 and 1973, often collaborating with members of Mann and Brinsley Schwarz. Despite strong songwriting and cult support, they never broke through commercially. Their records, especially Beware the Shadow in 1972, have aged well. Quiet gems for fans of rootsy, introspective British rock. Another short-lived band was Brisbane's Rezar. Although they didn't last long, but they lit up the Australian punk scene like a Molotov. Formed in 1977, they dropped their only official single, Task Force, in 1978. A frantic 2-minute blast of teenage rebellion. The band built a local following through wild live shows, often at odds with the conservative climate of late 70s Queensland. Political pressure, police harassment, and internal burnout led to their breakup by 1979. No album, no tour, just one iconic 7-inch that captured the raw energy of Aussie punk's first wave. Today, Razor is remembered as one of Australia's earliest and most urgent punk voices. Let's continue with Gravy Train, who brought something different to the early 70s prog scene. Flute-driven rock with a gritty edge. Their 1971 album, A Ballad of a Peaceful Man, stood out for blending heavy guitar riffs with orchestral arrangements and melodic flute lines. Tracks like Alone in Georgia showed they could swing from hard rock to haunting balladry without missing a beat. Signed to the Vertigo label early on, they released 4 albums but never gained widespread traction. Overshadowed by bigger names, they slipped into obscurity. Still, their music holds up. Raw, ambitious, and packed with the kind of depth prog fans live for. Nuts delivered straight-ahead hard rock with the kind of swagger you'd expect from a band sharing stages with AC/DC and Queen. Their 1974 debut, Nuts, opened with Ain't No Thanks to You, a gritty, hook-filled anthem that showed they meant business. The band released 4 albums through the mid-70s, all packed with solid riffs, tight arrangements, and anthemic choruses. Despite support slots on major tours and strong musicianship, they never broke through commercially. By the end of the decade, they'd rebranded briefly as Rage, but disappeared soon after. For fans of no frills, working-class British rock, Nuts is a buried gem. The first 80s band I want to discuss is The Sound. This band, led by the deeply introspective Adrian Borland, released a string of critically acclaimed albums that never got their due. Their 1980 debut, Jeopardy, delivered emotionally charged post-punk with tracks like I Can't Escape Myself that hit with stark honesty and atmospheric tension. They followed it up with From the Lion's Mouth in 1981, a darker, more polished effort that still didn't break them into the mainstream. Borland's struggles with mental health cast a long shadow over the band's work and legacy. Despite little commercial success, The Sound's catalog remains a powerful personal journey that resonates decades later. Now, the Comsat Angels crafted some of the most atmospheric post-punk of the early 80s, yet somehow stayed under the radar. Their debut album, Waiting for a Miracle, 1980, introduced a minimalist, haunting sound anchored by Stephen Fellow's icy vocals and razor-sharp guitar work. Independence Day became their signature track, melancholic, urgent, and criminally underplayed. Despite touring with U2 and Susie and the Banshees, commercial success never followed. Later albums saw them shift toward a more commercial sound under label pressure, but the early records remained cult classics. For many, they were the perfect bridge between Joy Division and the Chameleons. With a name that sounded like a tongue twister and a sound like a freight train, Red Lorry, Yellow Lorry carved their niche in the darker corners of the post-punk landscape. Their 1985 debut, Talk About the Weather, featured pounding drum machines, jagged guitar lines, and Chris Reed's deep, deadpan vocals. Hollow Eyes became a standout track, combining relentless rhythm with bleak atmosphere. Unlike many of their peers, the Lorries avoided synths, sticking to a raw, guitar-driven attack. Despite cult success and a dedicated fan base, they never broke into the mainstream. Still, their early work remains a goth post-punk essential. What I like about Virgin Prunes is that they pushed boundaries few others dared touch. Emerging from Dublin's post-punk scene in the late 70s, they blended gothic atmospheres with avant-garde performance art. Their 1982 debut, If I Die, I Die, was unsettling and brilliant. Tracks like Baby Turns Blue mixed tribal rhythms, dissonant guitars, and guttural vocals. Led by Gavin Friday and Googie, both childhood friends of Bono, the band used shock, costume, and chaos as tools of expression. Their work was never designed for mass appeal, and they liked it that way. Virgin Prunes remain one of the most fearless and artful bands of the post-punk era. Let's talk about Death of Samantha. What a name. They brought sharp wit and noisy guitar work to the American underground in the mid-80s. Their debut, Strung Out on Jargon in 1986, balanced chaotic rock energy with quirky literate lyrics. Tracks like Coca-Cola and Licorice revealed a band unafraid to get weird, loud, and smart all at once. Fronted by John Petkovich, they were part of the same Cleveland scene that birthed Pere Ubu and shared that same experimental spirit. Despite critical praise and strong regional support, they never broke nationally. Over time, they became a cult band. Unpolished, unpredictable, and beloved for exactly that reason. The Membranes exploded out of Blackpool's DIY punk scene in the early 80s, with a sound that was chaotic, abrasive, and impossible to pin down. Their 1983 release Crack House was pure post-punk noise rock, angular riffs, distorted bass, and a total disregard for polish. Led by John Robb, who would later become a noted music journalist, the band mixed punk ethics with experimental drive. They self-released cassettes, played tiny clubs, and built a cult following. After disbanding in 1990, they returned in the 2000s and 10s with new material and renewed energy. Still loud, still defiant, the Membranes never cared about fitting in. Here's another UK band you need to hear, Rudimentary Penny. They emerged in the early 80s as part of the UK's anarcho-punk movement, but they stood completely apart in sound and vision. Their 1983 debut Death Church was raw and furious, but laced with surreal lyrics and eerie artwork drawn by frontman Nick Blinko. Their later release, Cacophony, 1988, was a concept album inspired by H.P. Lovecraft. Esoteric, chaotic, and genuinely unsettling. The band avoided live shows, interviews, and mainstream exposure. Blinko's mental health struggles shaped both the band's aesthetic and their cult following. Rudimentary Penny became legend in punk's darkest corners. Uncompromising, mysterious, and still shrouded in shadows. Savage Grace emerged from the early 80s Los Angeles metal scene with a speed and precision that rivaled their European peers. Their 1983 EP The Dominatrix and 1985 full-length Master of Disguise showcased blistering guitar work, soaring vocals, and tight songwriting. Tracks like Bound to Be Free became cult favorites in the underground. While glam metal was dominating LA, Savage Grace leaned toward the European power metal style, earning them a loyal fan base overseas, especially in Germany. Despite solid material and strong live performances, they never caught on in the US mainstream. Today, they're a revered deep cut in metal circles. Let's continue with this killer band. Killdozer sounded like a bulldozer plowing through a dive bar, but loud, slow, and snarling. Formed in 1983 in Madison, Wisconsin, they fused sludge rock with dark humor and Midwestern grit. Their 1989 album 12 Point Buck turned rural absurdity into art with songs like Knuckles the Dog, Who Helps People, balancing noise with satire. Producer Butch Vig got his start recording them, years before Nevermind. Killdozer never chased fame, but their influence helped shape grunge and noise rock. Bands like Melvins and Helmet listened closely. They didn't just make music, they stomped all over it. And here we are with the last band. In the late 80s, while hair metal screamed from the Sunset Strip, Salem 66 was quietly rewriting the rules in Boston. One of the first all-female rock bands signed to an indie label, they blended jangle, pop, post-punk, and raw emotional weight long before it was cool. Their 1987 album Natural Disasters, National Treasures is full of haunting hooks and unpolished charm. Salem 66 didn't fit the mainstream, but that was the point. They opened the door for countless DIY and alternative acts to follow. Obscure, definitely, but for those who know, they were pioneers hiding in plain sight. All those bands topped the chart, but they rewired the underground. These are the bands you've never heard of, but will never forget.